Okay, so today we will be doing Hoshaya Perek Vav, the 6th chapter. It's not a long chapter, but really every single verse in this chapter, more or less, has a worthwhile to take a couple minutes to analyze the verse and what's actually being said. Some of the themes that we've built so far will come back. Some of the themes that we've seen in other books and texts will come back, but it's very much a rich, albeit short, chapter. So the chapter starts off, Lechuven Hashuva El Hashem, Ki Hu Taraf, V'yirpaenu, Yach Vayach B'Shenu. So it seems like this is kind of like a mass tshuva movement of sorts. Let us go and let us return. Right? The Chuvan Hashuva doesn't even sound like it's necessarily led by anybody, but there seems to be this inkling of returning to God. But it's really interesting because I think it's interesting just to parallel it to kind of the way that people talk about challenges to their theology in 2020. So, Kihu Taraf Virpei, because it was God who caused us, right? All of the problems, right? God was the one that did these things. And, right, so the 2020 perspective, I think, would be like, I don't want that God, right? The God that causes all this terrible things in the world, that's a God I don't want. And the ancient people's response was, no. If God's the one causing the problems because we did something wrong or whatnot, then that means God's the one who can fix it. So we've discussed plenty of times how the Jews perceived Baal as a particularly appropriate avodah zarah, a particularly appropriate form of idolatry because the Jews in Israel required water, and Baal was the water avodah zarah, the water idol, providing water to those who prayed to it. And therefore, right, if they viewed Baal as the one who needed to be appeased in order for water to come, so then they would appease Baal, right? So if Baal was the source of the treifa, the taraf, so to speak, then Baal would be the one that they would target. So here, this mass movement is coming to the realization that it is God who is in control of these things, and therefore it is God that needs to be pursued, right? And right, even the Marikra kind of says it even clearer on the next point, right? Vayach b'Shenu. So he hit us and then knows how to bandage us because he was the one who gave us the hit. He's the one who gave us the patch. He's the one who knows exactly the location and what it looks like. So he's the best one to actually fix and to heal, right? Whatever malady or whatever reality has God has wrought. It's just really interesting to think about that as a perspective, right? As opposed to, right, a God that's going to punish in that way, right? I want nothing to do with, right? There's a certain recognition, at least, that this is more of the focus is not on the right a God that punishes, right? There's a kind of a reality that man sins and God punishes because of that, and the result of that is that we need to appeal to God in order to get back on track. It's just an interesting wrinkle, I think, when you compare it to today. Pasuk Beis, Yichayenu. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Compared to Yeshayahu, when did he live? Was he before or after? Because there's a pasuk so similar in Yeshayahu.
So I believe Yeshayahu. So Hoshaya, we said, is a contemporary of, I think we said Yechezkel, which would mean he's a little bit after.
So he's later.
Give me one second. Let me just confirm. And I have half of my notes here and half my notes in the shul. I'm just trying to see, because we talked about this when we first started, and it's slipping my mind right now when exactly he's talking.
But just lechuvni v'akechan or marashim im yiyu chataichem kashani kasher gelbinu v'biadimu katola katsemer yiyu, and it's sort of like the it's lechuve, and but then God says, and then but instead of that God caused it, just that you're a mess and we'll fix you. But it just seems like such a follow up on that. Anyway, sorry.
That's interesting. No. It's thank you for pointing it out. The truth is that unfortunately my learning of Yeshayahu has only been surface. It's one of the books that I still need to get to and deeper learn. But yeah, thanks. It's one of my projects. We'll get to it. But thank you for the point. Pasuk Beis Yechayinu miyomayim bayom hashlishi yekimenu v'nechya lefanav. So Rashi here is what often gets quoted. Rashi focuses on trying to answer what's with the 2 days versus the third day, what exactly is going on. So I would say the midrashic reading of this pasuk is it's referring to the Batei Mikdash, right? The Chayenu miyomayim yichazkenu mishtei paranios she'avru aleinu mishtei mikdashos shecharvu, right? So you helped us, right, get past the destructions of the first 2 temples, but Bayom Hashlishi Kimenu v'nechya lefanav, right? Once the 3rd temple comes, we will, right, live, and right, it will be forever. We'll be able to live before God forever. On a pshat level reading of this pasuk, so the Mari Kara says, right, we've been turning to Ashur for all this time, and Ashur can't help us, right? All we need to do is turn to God, and in a couple of days, right, God could have solved our problems. Instead, we thought to look elsewhere for the fixing of our problems, and that caused us much pain and problems. So that is a pretty stark, right? So it does what the Marikra does not address is the 2 days versus the 3rd day. Like what exactly? The point is that it's a few days. Right? The point is that if we had just turned to God, we could have avoided a lot of hurt if we just directed our tefillot to God immediately. Because again, God's the one who could actually help us. Ashur can't actually help us. We thought Ashur could help us, but it turns out that Ashur is not going to really be much help. In fact, they end up being a big part of our demise. Pasuk Gimel, V'neid'a v'nirdefa ladas es Hashem kishachar nachon motza'o v'yavo chageshem lanu kimalkosh yoreh aretz. So this is also, again, just noticing the way this pasuk is structured. So we've talked a lot in Hoshaya. Hoshaya, I think more than any other prophet, talks about this notion of das Elokim, or das Hashem, right? The importance of knowing God. And here, right, there's a 2-step plan. The first is v'neida, we will know, near defa, and then we will chase. Ladas es Hashem, right? So what the commentators point out here is that it's a very important order, right? That if you could act, right, on a whim, right? You could be inspired by something and you just start acting. But if you don't first understand and know how that action should be harnessed, then just acting could sometimes take you the wrong direction, right? You start acting, and then you come to understand after the fact, and you realize that all your actions, in fact, were distancing you further from what you were supposed to be doing. So instead, first know God, then nir defa, chase after God, ladat et Hashem, in order to know God. So first get the background, then act properly, and then kishachar nachon motza'o, you'll find God, right, like the dawn, meaning God is, you have to come to the realization that God is ubiquitous, A, and God is consistent, B, God is always there, and you can always expect God to return. right? Right, and right, as we pointed out, the main concern of the Jews of that time is always the rain, and so right, God being here, right, the bringer of the heavy rains, right, v'yavo chageshem lanu, so it's more like rain, but the point is the sustenance that God will provide, right, is very much real, and the reality of God is very much real. All you need to do is come to these two things. First, Vineda, right? Understand the reality of God, understand what God stands for, and then Vinirdafa, chase after. That two-pronged approach is going to help you to accomplish this goal. Pasuk Dalet. Ma'aselecha Ephraim, ma'aselecha Yehuda, v'chazdechem ka'anan boker, v'chatal mashkim holech. So, I mean, this is just, I mean, it's very, these psukim in this parak are, I feel like they're very poetic. So, Hoshaya says he turns to Ephraim and Yehuda, and this is, again, part of the challenge of trying to address exactly who Hoshaya is talking to, even though the cities that show up are all northern cities, right? He constantly is talking not only to Yisrael, but to Yehuda as well. But what am I going to do with you? Right? Like, I feel like this is a conversation with like your brother who can't seem to figure it out, right? Like, what am I going to do with you? Like, Ephraim, what am I going to do with you? Yehuda, right? Your good deeds, right? When you kind of do something good, right? Chazdechem, which chesed was another one of these very important, chesed v'rachamim was another one of these very important points for Hoshea. It's ka'anan boker v'chatal. It's like a morning cloud or like dew, right? You wake up to it, but then it leaves, right? You're inspired for a moment. You have this momentary inspiration that you're going to do something, but then there's no consistency. There's no long-term commitment to really, right, living and changing your life because of that inspiration. It's a momentary passing inspiration, and then when it passes, it passes. It's like dew or this morning cloud, right? And so this is kind of right, God saying, Neidav v'nir defa, you need to really come to knowledge and then really chase it. And he's juxtaposing that with what's the reality on the ground, which is you have these, right, if you have this lightning in a bottle, but you don't seem to capture it, you let the lightning come and it's inspiring for a moment, but then it does nothing for you. It doesn't actually inform or change the way you live your life. So what good is it? What good is it? And he addresses not only Yehuda, but Yisrael as well.
I like how he continues the allegory of rain versus dew.
Yeah.
Like God is rain and you're a little bit of light stuff.
Exactly. And I think that they both so fitting because of the underlying conversation that's happening right in the bars of Yehuda and the northern kingdom as well is where we're getting our rainwater from, right? And so to use this language is very rich. Now, the Radak on this pasuk, so he gives some examples of both Yehuda and of how they are like a kanan boker v'chatal mashkim holech. So he says, if you think about the northern kingdom, so you have both Yerevam and Nevat and Yehu, who right are kind of the two, I would say, starters of right. They have the prophets' sign of approval to start their breakaways, right? So Yehu's the one who basically kills out Yerevam and Nevat's family, and Yerevam and Nevat is that first breakaway from Rechavam. Both times they have a prophet basically leading them down their path, but immediately after they seize power, it's like within the same chapter, in the same parak that they actually come to power, both of them go off the rails, right? Yerevam and Nevat immediately sets up these two different centers in the north and south borders of Indan and Beit El. and declares Shechem to be kind of the new Yerushalayim. And Yehu, right, goes on a murder rampage, well above and beyond what was originally supposed to be kind of what the Nevi'im had in mind for him. And we had the conversation when we did it in Malachim, right, that in some ways when he goes above and beyond, even the murders that were in line with the prophecies, right, become now muddled, right? Because if you're not going to follow God's word to a T, then when you use God's word as an excuse to do your own bidding, that is not avodat Hashem. That's avodat yourself, right? You're serving yourself and just using God as cover. And when you start finding other ways of doing certain things, right, that's proof that it was never really to serve God. And both Yehu and Yerav ben Nevat are examples of that, where, right, you had this spark of inspiration, you had a prophet leading you, and then literally in the same chapter, you go off the rails. Similarly, not quite exactly the same, but still pretty similarly, in the south. So we spoke a lot about Yoshiyahu's Tshuva movement and how Yoshiyahu brought so many of the Jews back to Hashem, at least on a surface level. But the reality was that immediately in the generations to follow Yoshiyahu, all of the problems that Yoshiyahu had reversed get reversed again, right? And so it doesn't take long for the Jewish people to revert back to their bad habits and their old ways. And so even though Yoshiyahu, right, in his generation was able to, right, in some ways, right, Neidav and Erdafa, right, it doesn't last. And so it's a little bit of a longer arc, but same concept. The Jewish people can't seem to really dig in and commit. It's lightning in the bottle that they let out, right? They catch it for a brief moment, but then it dissipates and they can't really run with it. So this is the Radak kind of giving real life examples of what Hoshaya might be referring to when he's talking to the Jews. And this probably were stories that people were well aware of at that time. And they right, sometimes the rabbi can say a vague line, and he knows that certain people are going to hear it a certain way, right? So I'm pretty sure when Hoshaya is saying these things to the north and to the south, they already are hearing, right, some of these realities when they're listening. I wasn't going to say this, but when I was in Maryland, I had a student, really, really awesome student, Chana Garbo. And whenever I gave a sermon, like I kid you not, whenever I gave a sermon, she'd be like, I know what you're talking about. I'm like, Chana, I'm not, but I'm glad that you're taking this for your own life and for your own direction. That's wonderful. What I didn't have that in mind per se, but it's very interesting when people kind of read into what you say for their own needs. Fine. Pasuk Hey. Al kain chatzavti b'nevi'im haragtim be'imrei fi u'mishpatecha or yetzei. So this pasuk is really the interpretations are all over the map. Exactly what's happening in this, right? So because, right, so this is a reaction to the previous verse, right? The previous verse talking about you're like this morning dew, this morning cloud. So al kain chatzavti b'nevi'im haragtim be'imrei fi mishpatecha or yetzei. Right? So chatzavti, the Metzuda says it's inyan krisas avanim. It's the language of cutting stones. So the way that most understand this is that there is some sort of very clear messaging happening, right? Because of your wishy-washiness, God had to kind of set you on the straight and narrow. And so he sent these prophets that, right, with the edge of a knife, right, the clarity of their direction and their vision was such that it was meant to kind of put you on the right path. But what happened? Haragtim be'imrei fi. So exactly who gets killed, right? Be'imrei fi. So imrei fi seems to be a parallel to Nevi'im, right? Normally that would be how you. So we'll see how different, right? So Rashi says the way that you read this pasuk is because you're wishy-washy, I sent you these prophets that gave you very clear messages, but you weren't careful with those messages. You didn't really listen to those messages. You were not nizhar with those messages, right? Therefore, right, who gets killed? You get killed, right? Because you didn't listen to my messaging, therefore, you're going to be punished. And then the end of the pasuk, right, umishpatecha or yetzei, because how else could I have responded, basically, right? Your judgment was as clear as day, right? Because what else do you expect when I give you your wishy-washy, I give you clear direction, right? You're going to get punished because you didn't listen. That's Rashi's understanding of this pasuk. The Mitsuda has a different understanding. He says, right, therefore I gave you these prophets with these clear messages, right? But what did you do with them? Right? Haragtim b'mrefi, you killed, right? With those clear messages, right? When Zechariah, right, or Uriah are giving you your messages, what happens? You kill them. You kill the prophets because of their prophecies, right? In middle of their prophecies. The Imrefi, when they're in the middle of giving their prophecies, you're killing them because you don't like the clarity and the direction that they're telling you that you need to take. So what happens? So you're killing prophecies. And then, right, right, Mishpatecha or Yetzei, like, how do you expect to come out of that judgment on the right side? If literally I'm sending you prophets and you're killing prophets, what are you expecting? The last perspective, the Da Mikra, Yehuda Kiel, so he actually says, right, therefore I gave you, right, these prophets with a certain clarity of vision, and I killed the Imre Fi people. Who are those people? The Nevi'e Sheker, right? Those people who relied on their sharp tongues to be able to misguide you. I got rid of all of the noise, right? Like Eliyahu and Har Carmel, right? The Jews are wishy-washy. I got rid of the Nevi'e Baal, right? And yet, right? And yet, still not. You still, right? You're wishy-washy. You still, right? Nothing's changed. Nothing changes, right? Sorry, mishpatecha or yetzei, right? So again, right? If you're wishy-washy and then I try and give you this clarity, and it doesn't change anything, so then again, your judgment, right? Or yetzei, like a light going out.
But that's not the pshat.
What do you mean? Which ones?
So,
all three.
All three, right? Because al ken chatzavti banvi'im, thus I have sort of dug in a destructive way in the prophets. I have killed them with my words, and then justice will come out. I mean, to me, it sounds like he's talking about the Nevi'e Sheker, who have encouraged this chastechem ka'anan boker, that you guys have no, you don't have rain. You're like real lightweights and not doing what you're supposed to do, and thus I have gotten rid of your Nevi'e Sheker, and things will get better.
Meaning you're reading umishpatecha or yetzei as a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, once I get rid of these Nevi'e Sheker. Because if Lashon, Nefel Lashon, like the first, Aken Chatzavti Ban Ve'im is the same thing as Haragtim Ve'im.
Yeah.
So I'm destroying these prophets, and then justice will come out. So I don't know, that's how I read it.
Right, so but how do you read that? Again, you're reading it as the killing of false prophets?
Yeah.
All of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, so meaning it's just the meaning I think you're most similar to the Yehuda Kiel, right? To the Dat Mikra. What the Dat Mikra does is he says the parallel language is there, but right, he still seems to focus the first half of the verse, I think, on true prophets. And yes, it still is parallel language. Right? Al-Kain Chatzavti Badivim. So, I mean, the word Chatzavti is a hard word. It's not a it's not a word exactly that fits, right? Your language that you used was like digging.
Or like to break stone, right?
Right. So that's right. So that's
So
what the Masuda says. It's krisas avanim. It's the breaking of or the sharpening of or rather the cutting of stone. Um, so the way that I've seen many to take that as is a certain clarity. There's a certain exactness to that process. Um, but exactly how it relates to haragtim, I think, is where the that's where the a lot of this analysis is coming out of. How do you parallel the word chatzavti with the word haragtim? Right, because Nevi'im and Imrei Fi are more easily paralleled than chatzavti and haragtim. I think that's where you're getting this a little bit of a parallel opposite, as opposed to a parallel, just a pure, just the same idea with milim shonot, right? But understood. Fine. Pasuk vav ki chesed chafatzti velo zevach v'das elokim me'olos. And so again, right, this is like one of these psukim that you hear about. Here we get to see it, right? That what does God want? God wants our chesed. I actually found it interesting that in this verse, chesed and dat elokim are reversed from neda v'nashuva that we saw earlier. Sorry, neda v'nirdafa. We saw earlier that I made a big deal about the order, and so none of the mefarshim kind of note the order here, but the order gets reversed. I was wondering if it's possible that chesed maybe is a different type of meaning. There's no there are examples of chesed being done improperly, right? Just look at Lot, right? Look at some people who find a way to even ruin chesed, but which is a skill. But maybe, right, the idea is that chesed, generally speaking, right, is always good, and it may even help you get to dat elokim at some point. But these two seem to be like the two that Hoshaya comes back to time and time again, right? God, ki b'chesed chapatzti, I wanted your chesed, v'lo zabach, I didn't want your korbanot, I didn't need your sacrifices. V'dat elokim me'olot, again, a firm knowledge of God that leads to, right, this nirdafa, that leads to tracing after the will of God. That form of knowledge is what God, through Hoshaya, is asking of us, not just to constantly do ritual. And it's interesting to think about this just in modern terms, right? Because ritual is this really fascinating reality of many religions, but Orthodoxy certainly is one of the kings of ritual. And ritual, it has the ability to be an incredible tool or crutch for different people. For some people, without ritual, it's hard to feel the connection to God on a regular basis. On the flip side, if the ritual becomes the ends and the only way that people engage in their religion, and it doesn't lead to a greater, right, perspective on life, and also, more importantly, I think often, right, a impact on your personality, so and the good deeds that you do, right, then often the ritual from the outside, right, looks empty, hollow, and the whole entire religion seems to lose basically all value, right? When you can, right, use your ritual, hide behind your ritual, and then do things that are shady, right? It just, the damage that you do to the religion is just uncanny. So again, Hoshea here is trying to convey that it's not the korbanot that God is after, but is these two things, chesed and dat elokim. It's the good deeds and, right, and just some form of knowledge of God. The Radak here, again, pointing historically, So he says that even in the times that you temporarily got rid of idolatry, times like Yoshiyahu, right? Again, on a surface level, right? They were able to clean up their ritual acts, so that the korbanot now were not targeting Avodah Zarah, they were targeting God. But we noted many times when we talked about Yoshiyahu's reign that the impact was surface, right? It never got past just this surface level impact on the Jewish people. And so they're still worshiping idolatry in the comfort of their homes, and they're hiding it in different ways to keep the government from finding out about it. But the impact of Yoshiyahu's Tshuva movement doesn't reach right beyond. Yes, the korbanot have been fixed, the ritual has been fixed. Now we're directing it towards God, but that doesn't change, right? Some of the issues that are in existence. Pasuk Zayin, Vehima ke'adam avru brit, sham bagduvi. So here we have two, again, I would say a pshat and a drash explanation of this verse. So Rashi and the Radak's second answer, he's really more quoting Rashi than anything else, which is the drash reading, says Adam here is a reference to Adam Arishon. Right? Adam and God had a very simple deal, right? You stay in Gan Eden, enjoy the fruits of the garden, except for these two trees in the middle of the garden, don't eat them, right? Everything else, you're good to go. And right, Vehemaka Adam Avru Brit Sham Bagdubi. Right? So it was a simple agreement. And there in Gan Eden, right, in this wonderful garden, right, that is where Adam still, right, rebelled against me. Right? And the parallel here is the Jewish people in Israel, right, in this world's version of Gan Eden, right, Sham, there, right, you are rebelling against me. That's how Rashi understands this pasuk. The Mari Kara says that, again, the idea here is just like, it's not Adam Harishon, it's just like any other friend that you make a deal with and break it. So there seems to be no difference in terms of scale, in terms of respect given towards God, right? It's like a person who goes against, right? You shouldn't do this with your friend either. But the point is that you're just throwing away our brit without much anything. And the Sham Bagdubi, so it could be Israel, but the Mari Kara kind of reads it as an exclamation point. That even when we're making the brit, as we're making the brit, literally, Sham, right, Bagdubi, you're already planning how you're going to renege, how you're going to backtrack, how you're going to get yourself out of this brit. And again, thinking about Yehu or Yervin ben Nevat, right, are great examples of, right, even as they're talking to a prophet, they seem to already be scheming for ways that are antithetical to the way, right, God would want them to lead. So that's perhaps what's happening in this verse. Now, again, as I said, this chapter, I don't know what it is about it. There's just so much like depth, and they're very short psukim. It's a short chapter, short psukim, but I feel like there's just so much. And the next couple psukim again, you can spend a lot of time trying to unpack them. So pasuk ches, Gilad Kiryat Poalei Aven Akuba Midam. So Gilad is a place. We're going to have Gilad and Shechem coming up in the next verse. So let's just read how they translate this for a second. Gilad is a city of evildoers, of those who waylay for blood. Right, so Gilad Kiryat Pole Aven, right? So people who sin. Akuba Midam. So Akuba, the Mitsuda, right? Milaya Orbaim Lishpoch Dam Naki. So it's filled with people who spill blood. So it's filled with murderers. So the Gemara in Makos, Daf Yud Amid Aleph, so they ask the question as to why per capita there are so many more Ari Miklat on the Transjordan. Gilad is in the Transjordan, by the way. It's on the other side of the Jordan River, the section where Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe live. So modern day Jordan. So there are a lot more Ari Miklat, which are cities of refuge, places that if people kill people by mistake, they can flee to. Per capita and per person, there's a lot more of them on the Transjordan than there are in the mainland of Eretz Yisrael. And so the Gemara asks, why is that? And the Gemara answers that Gilad is, or that the settlers of Gilad and the like are a lot more murderers on that side of the Transjordan, and actually uses the city of Gilad as an example, perhaps from Hoshaya. I don't remember whether the Gemara quotes Hoshaya or not. But right, the point is that, and even though they're right going to cities of refuge, it's for people who kill people by mistake. The explanation I've always heard in yeshiva was that if people are killing people by mistake, that means right that the value of human life is not there, that they're not putting in certain fail safes to make sure that people don't kill each other by mistake, and that's an indication that there's an overall lack of carefulness about murder in general, and so it just all goes together. The Malbim reads a lot of this chapter as talking about this one kind of right, when we talked about the Chatzavti Nevi'im and Rakti Bim Refi, so the Malbim points back to a couple of prophets who were killed, 2 times in particular. The first time was in the time of Eliyahu and Achav, when Izebel, Achav's wife, targets all the prophets, and Ovadia saves them. So when you know the song, right, Eliyahu Hagil Adi, right? So it's a reference back to that moment in history when Izebel, the queen, is targeting prophets. And the second, right, Yiratzchu Shchema in Pasuk Tet, right, is a reference to Yeravim ben Nevat when he took power and he set up the shrines in Dan and Beit El and declared Shechem to kind of be the capital of the north. So there, again, Yeravim ben Nevat had plenty of prophets who were prophets of God who were not very fond of his actions. So the Malbim says that in an effort to silence them, right, he went around and killed or got rid of them in some way or form. And so these are references to the Malbim to these 2 different time periods when Nevi'im were targeted because of their prophecies on a more massive scale. And so you have Gilad on the one hand and Shechem on the other hand. So let's just read the next verse, and then we'll kind of go a little bit further. The Malbim, last point of the Malbim, he just points out that Shechem and Gilad also show up in Jewish history as places of strife, right? Shechem with Shimon and Levi and that pact that goes awry, and Gilad is one of the locations that eventually leads to the war during the Pelegish Megillah story at the end of Sefer Shoftim. So more stuff to kind of parallel or foreshadow some of the things that ended up happening in these places. So Pasuk Tet is also really interesting, and I just kind of jumped ahead to it momentarily just to explain the Malbim, but we'll jump back to try to go through the Pasuk more carefully. Ish gidudim chever kohanim derech yirtzechu shechma kizima asu. So so there's this band, Chever Kohanim. There is this kind of a gang of Kohanim. So you have people who are traveling, and you have this gang of Kohanim who on the way, right, kill these people. Ki zima asu, because they performed zima. And again, the word shechma, which again the Malbim reads as a reference to the city of Shechem. So the Rashi and others, right? Lashon kat achat. It's a language of a group, of a right. Or the Mitzuda says, tzad echad v'dei echad. Right. So one perspective or one side. So you have here a number of explanations as to what exactly is going on. So were there in fact these gangs of Kohanim who were stopping people on their paths? What exactly is this a reference to? So the Mitzuda says Chas v'Shalom that this is really the Kohanim gangs who are doing this. He says what's happening here is right that this is kind of a reference to earlier in the book of Hoshaya, when Hoshaya rips on the leadership and says, guys, like you have to give tochacha, you have to give guidance. You are right the spiritual leaders, and so when you don't lead, right, you leave a vacuum. And so because they weren't doing their jobs, they are the ones blamed here for people taking advantage of other people on the road. But the Mitzuda says it's not the Kohanim themselves who are the gang who are doing these things. Rather, it is their responsibility, and they're not taking care of it, and therefore they're being blamed. Similarly, but not the same, the Radak says, no. These are actual Kohanim. Again, they're Kohanim who have bamot in their backyards or bamot in their shrines, wherever it is that they're going. And these Kohanim are they're so maybe murder's not quite what's going on here, but the point is right, they're taking advantage. They're fleecing these people because they're taking their animals, they're slaughtering them to right either avodat Hashem zara or to avodah zara itself, and whatever it is, it's problematic. And he says that at these locations, right, their form of worship could take any sort of form, right? So people could be literally doing any sort of worship, things that were inappropriate, things that lead to zima, which could eventually lead to things like ritzicha, right? Things where you have various idolatrous practices, whether it's throwing your children through fire or, right, defecating in front of, or, right, having relations in front of. There are lots of different ways that service of idolatry could lead to other forms of immorality. And so you have, right, kind of the slippery slope that these Kohanim are fleecing people on the side of the street as they're traveling to wherever they're traveling, maybe even, right, referencing, I didn't see anyone say this, but I was thinking it could be referencing what Yeravim Nevat set up, right? All of his shrines, his main goal was to prevent them from going to the temple, right? So if on their way to the temple, they have, right, someone who's kind of, right, saying, oh, you don't have to go there, right? You could just stop by here and do it here, right? And all of the resulting immorality that came from Yeravim Nevat's shrines, right, could be what's being referenced here historically. But, right, the notion here again is you have this group, this gang of Kohanim, or the Kohanim are to blame for it, and they are doing this to people while they're on the road, while they're traveling, again, ostensibly towards some service of God, because why else are they making a pit stop at to bring a korban? But that's the way that most of the Mefarshim understand this verse. It's a hard verse to really parse out exactly what's going on. Yeah, but
what does kechake mean?
So the Mitzuda says, "Kemosh gedudei halistim mechakim ish over derech." So they wait for passer. So it's kind of like, it's a language of like to pounce upon them. Yeah, but it's a hard pasuk to understand, and it's also a troubling pasuk once you try to kind of dig in what's going on. It's not a happy pasuk. So the last two verses, unlike many of our other verses, you kind of have these glimmers of hope. Here, your glimmer of hope you got at the beginning, and then it's all downhill afterwards. So Beit Yisrael Ra'iti Sha'aruriya Sham Zinus Ephraim Nitma Yisrael. So to the house of Israel, I see your Davar Migual says, right, you're discussing this, right there, your Znus to Ephraim, impurity to Yisrael. So the Mefarshim understand, again, I find it so fascinating how interchangeable Znus and Avodah Zarah are kind of translated in the Mefarshim. So again, the Radak here kind of points towards Avodah Zarah as being the main sin. Obviously, probably being not corrupted, but directed by the Book of Melachim and how much Avodah Zarah plays a central role in eventually even leading to Znus, which is a point that we've made many, many times, that promiscuity often came from Avodah Zarah, and in many ways the Avodah Zarah was their heter, was their way of saying, oh, this is actually some form of worship, it's therefore okay. And then the last verse is kind of this, it's a really, again, also hard verse to wrap your head on, right? Gam Yehuda Shas Katzir Lach Bishuvi Shavus Ami, right? So Yehuda basically grafts a branch from Ephraim. They kind of take a leaf out of Ephraim's book, a page out of Ephraim's book, right? And it was at a moment when, right, God thought that there would be a return, right? God thought that there was a path to coming back, and instead, that's not what happens. Instead, Yehuda follows suit. And again, this was when the demise of the 10 kingdoms, and the kingdom of Yehuda seems to have Yoshiyahu and whatnot, and some other people who seem to have this glimmer of hope, but it does not last. It does not really catch, and so it leads to their eventual demise as well. It's just sad. I don't know. So much of Tanakh is like such a downer. But then you look at the world and you're like, well, what have we learned? Like, we're doing better, I think. We still seem to make a lot of the same mistakes again and again and again. So I don't know.
Cheerful.
Yep, I have no inspiring message to end this week. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll pick up with Perek Zayin next week. And for those who are interested, on Tuesday and Thursday, I'll be doing Mesilat Yesharim. We'll start off with an intro, talk about the Ramchal, who he was a little bit, and his contribution. And on Monday and Wednesday, Rabbi Zach will be doing some Parsha deep dives. It's also a time if you want to just check in, please do. No pressure.
That's midday?
Yeah, it's 12:30 to probably 12:51 will be the learning, 20 minutes, half hour, and then another half hour if people want to hang out. And then if people want to set up meetings, there could be a time when we kind of set up another time if people wanted to have a more extensive talk about something in private.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
See y'all later.
Mhm.